This is your lesson for the distributive property. This is one other property that we have in mathematics that we'll be studying this year. The distributive property uses multiplication to distribute a number. So algebraically it looks like this. If we're distributing the number, quote unquote, A, we're distributing it to B and also to C. But we have to be careful because C is a positive C. When we distribute, we're multiplying. So down here in the first example, we're multiplying because the 6 is bumped up to the parentheses. Draw in what I call the loopies to show everything that 6 is going to. This is a positive 6. It's important that we point that out. 6 times x is 6x. 6 times a positive 6 gives us a positive 36. It's important to keep the sign because that tells us what sign is going in between these two. 6x plus 36 is our answer. This is the distributive property, and we just simplified this expression right here to this. We can't do anything else because we don't know what x is at this point. All we're doing is simplifying an expression. Here, I'm going to go ahead and draw the dots, put the loopies, and then underline the plus 4. I'm going to do that in the first 4 examples, and then down below I'm going to work on just the loop part. 5 times x is going to give us 5x. When you have a number times a variable, you just write them down bumped up next to each other. I call that married by multiplication. 5 times the positive 4 is the positive 20. Come down here, put in your dot to remind you that you're multiplying. Draw the loopies to everything that you're distributing it to, each piece in parentheses, and underline the plus 8. 6 times x is 6x. 6 times a positive 8 is a positive 48. If I had not put in that positive, I would just have 6x 48, which makes no sense to you. Last example here, draw the dot, loopies, and underline. 9 times y is 9y, and 9 times a negative 8 is going to give me a negative 72. Going back to this, you would read this as 6x plus 48, not 6x positive 48, and this one 9y minus 72. So these are a couple more complex ones. Going to go ahead and draw in the loops. A negative 4 times a negative x. Negative x is really just saying negative 1x, so you can multiply the numbers. Negative 4 times negative 1 is a positive 4x. And negative 4 times a negative 3 will give me a positive 12. In this one, 6 times 2x, and then 6 times the positive 4. 6 times 2x, so that's going to be 6 times 2 is 12x, and 6 times a positive 4 is a positive 24. The other way you can think about this is you have 2x, 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 6 times like that. So that gives you 12x total. Next one has a fraction on the outside, nothing to worry about. 1/2 of 4x, so what's half of 4? That's 2x, and half of a positive 6 is a positive 3. Down here there's a 3 on the outside. 3 times 8x is 24x. 3 times a negative 9 is negative 27. Negative 3 times a negative 2 and 2x and a negative 4. Negative 3 times a negative 2x would be a positive 6x. Negative 3 times a negative 4 is a positive 12. If you don't know your integer rules, this is going to hurt. Next one, we have 8x times 4m and a minus 3. 8 times 4 we can do is 32. X times m, we just have to leave it as xm. The only thing I'm going to ask you is to write it as mx. Whenever we have multiple variables, we're going to put them in alphabetical order. And 8x times a negative 3 would give me a negative 24x. Don't forget the x on the end, a lot of people do. Next example, 1.25, so 1.25x, and 1.25 times a negative 4 is going to give me a negative 5. 0.75, I'm going to think about that as 3/4. 3/4 of 16, well 1/4 of 16 would be 4, so 3 of those would be 12x. And 1/4 of negative 24 is a negative 6, and 3 of those would be a negative 18. Last example here, 1/10 times 5x. That's going to give me 1/10 times 5 first. So it's really going to give me 1/2 here. So half x. 1/10 times a positive 30 is a positive 3 then. On the next page, there's another skill that's talking about undoing the distributive property, and it's actually called factoring. So that's what we're going to be calling this. This is factoring. So what you're doing is you're looking for what's a common factor between the two pieces, or there could even be 3 or more pieces too. So the common factor here is actually going to be a 4, because that's the biggest thing that I can pull out of both of them. So I'm going to write the 4 outside my parentheses. 4 times what is going to give me 4h? Well, 4 times just h. 4 times what is going to give me a positive 8? 4 times a positive 2. And if I look at that, I can actually go back and distribute now. 4 times h is 4h. 4 times positive 2 is positive 8. Notice I end up back where I started then. Down here, we're going to go through, try and pull out the biggest factor. 40p and a positive 50. Biggest thing that goes into them both is 10. 10 times what gives me 40p? Well, 10 times 4 gives me 40, and I need to put the p there. 10 times what gives me positive 50? It's a positive 5. Number 2, 30 plus 30j. Biggest thing I can pull out that they both have in common is a 30. 30 times what gives me 30? 1. 30 times what gives me 30j? A positive j. 30 plus 30j. 30x plus 20, biggest thing that comes out is a 10. 10 times what gives me 30? Would be 3x. And 10 times what gives me positive 20? That's a positive 2. Last example here, 4 comes out because that's the biggest thing they have in common. X plus 4.